Tonight, I want to share with you another amazing part of God's creation. And I want you to try and pronounce this word with me: echolocation. Echolocation. Well, you can just use the simple term, which we say sonar, where they emit, God's creatures emit a signal, and it bounces back, and through the information gathered from the bounce back, they can determine the location of their surroundings or their food, whatever it is. So many of God's creatures that use echolocation also have eyesight, but they had this incredible inbuilt ability to fly in the dark, to see in the dark, to swim in the dark. You're familiar with whales and dolphins who use it. Let me put a picture on the screen. This is one of God's creatures having a great time. Can you see him there? He looks happy, doesn't he? It's a bat. And he's just chilling out there, enjoying the night sky. Of course, how it works is they emit a frequency. And depending on the animal, that frequency can exceed what the human ear can discern. Bats, we can't hear what they say. They can. Dolphins, we can hear part of what they have to say, but much of it is beyond us. And it's the same is true with whales. But tonight I want to speak much more about another animal, one that we don't often associate with echolocation. And it's not a bat. Let me see if you can guess what it is. It's obviously not a fish either. Lives deep in the ground, in caves there in Borneo, across to Malaysia in the South China Sea. It is, in fact, a bird. It's the Asian swiftlet. Now, this is what he looks like. They're pretty small. They're about 14 centimeters long, roughly, something like that. They weigh about 14 grams. Very, very light birds, very small birds, and they have incredible abilities. But before I tell you about their abilities in more detail, let me tell you something very interesting about the way they nest. Now, you can see these nests. What do you notice about them? They look like they were bought at Bunnings, don't they? They're very clean, neat, tidy nests that don't resemble the kind of activity you would expect a bird nest to look like. What do you suppose that the bird's nest is made from? Everybody go. Now wipe the neck in front of you. This is made from bird saliva. And I've got a little video here of a bird making its nest. Both the male and the female appear very similar in colour, and they work together. They're monogamous. They stay together with their partner for life, and together they create the nest. They care for the young and so forth. And so they create these nests. Now, interestingly enough, many of the people living there in Southeast Asia have developed another use for these nests. Instead of just caring for little swiftlets, what do you suppose they do with those? Yeah, some of you know. Let me start with, this is what they look like once they've been cleaned and prepared. But who fancies bird spit coffee? Does that sound delicious or what? Another use for these birds' nests is, of course, bird's nest soup. And great attention and detail and risk goes into preparing a bird's nest soup. You can see these cables and wires and these men who, generation after generation, learn to harvest the swiftlet nests. They climb these ropes and homemade ladders. You can see why there would be many injuries and deaths that take place harvesting swiftlet nests. It's a big industry. Most of the nests that are harvested actually make their way to China after being cleansed, shaped, sorted by hand, and then sent off to China, where they're sold for around $6,000 a kilo for the best ones. And you can see how they're on display here. So many of those end up in the bellies of people who love bird's nest soup. Now you can see he's kind of looking at us thinking, what are you looking at? The swiftlet has some amazing features to the way it uses echolocation. Much of the time, the swiftlet is in its cave where it cannot see. If you see these things swarming, it's quite incredible that they don't bump into each other to start with. And then when you realize that they're flying in the dark and they're just using the sounds, and their frequency is one that we can hear. They're using sounds like clicking sounds produced in the throat. And the data they receive flying back to them allows them to switch and turn in great detail through these caves, finding their nest and their little babies. Here he is. I want to tell you about this bird. This is an oil bird. If you're South American, and I look at Pastor Randy here because he can speak the language, I'm going to have a go. Guacharos. Can you say guacharos? I said I'm not going to look at Pastor Randy because he probably knows how to say it. Guacharos, the oil bird. Called the oil bird because when you cook it up, its meat produces a lot of oil. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. The oil bird's eyes are amazing. It has more photoreceptors in layers than the falcon. It doesn't necessarily have more accurate eyesight, but it can see a lot better in the dark. And it's an amazing bird. Throughout its entire life, it will usually see no greater light than the moon. It lives almost entirely nocturnally. And again, this bird's slightly bigger than the swiftlet, makes its way through the caves, finds its little baby, amongst thousands of birds calling out for their mothers. There they are stacked, thousands of nests on the wall, and yet the mother and the father can hear and find their little ones. Doesn't that tell you something about God? If God can make a bird able to navigate its way through a dark cave in no light to find its little ones on the side of a cliff inside a cave, doesn't that tell you something about Jesus and his ability to know that you sit right where you are tonight? Pastor Randy's talking about God's incredible capacity to create, to heal. He's also talking about this thing of belief and trust. I want to think for a moment about the eyes of this bird. It can see in light, but it can also see with the sound that it emits. It tells me something about what Jesus calls us to do, isn't it? We all have eyes, but we are called to see on an entirely a different level altogether. And that thing called trust. I'm looking forward to what Pastor Randy has to share with us. Thank you.